And Adam, do you want to read out the next section?
Yeah, sure. Would you like me to screen share again, or?
That would be fantastic if you could.
Just let me know when that loads.
All right, so it's like, all right, here we go. Cool, so it's proper
This
scan.
is image depicting the endpoint of the draw.
Ah.
As you can see, he's just done a reverso-like motion to a flat blade position, almost, with the fingernails down. Right. So chapter 2 comments on the two main guards, inside guard and outside guard. After removing the sword from the scabbard without any loss of time, the player will be placed in a manner that can be seen in the figure. He can quickly beat the sword of the enemy with a false edge of his own sword and throw a mandrippo scolombrato while taking a great step, putting the right leg in front of the left. That dritto will end with him in inside guard, also called half cover guard, which is the second guard shown in figure 3 that your majesty can clearly see. But sometimes the enemy's sword is not in time for it to be able to be beaten. In this case, the player moving his vita must do the act of beating even if he cannot beat, and draw the aforesaid dritto, making sure to pull it and taking care not to be carried out of time or outside of the vita of the enemy. Having thrown the dritto, the player is now an inside guard. He can now take a great step forward with his right leg and beat the enemy's sword with the false edge of his. Then pushing his left leg forward, make a reverso, thus finding himself again an outside guard. As I've already indicated, according to the principles of my reasoning, in the beginning a man will be agile and clever. He will thrust carefully and accurately with the sword. When he comes to beat and pull the dritto, he will be placed in outside guard, with the point of his sword on the right, the arm extended, and the edge of the sword well turned so that the flat of the sword faces towards the earth. After he has pulled the dritto, as explained, he will find himself on inside guard, and similarly his arm extended, the sword held out with the true edge turned towards his left shoulder, and he stands gathered and collected with his vita. Now, these two principal guards can be reasonably called the two most useful and safest of guards that can benefit the player more than all other guards, and allow him to counter all those used by the opponent. He can adjust his guard by lowering or rising, according to whether his enemy rises or lowers, but always turns the true edge against their sword in order to remain defended against the enemy's attacks. Now, I'll just finish. This is his inside guard for reference.
Okay. That would be a lot. That's a lot more extended. All right. So when he's saying beat, is when he's talking about beating, is that a do you think that's like a distinct motion from just attacking, or is he, when he talks about like attacking and beating, is that a single motion where you strike your opponent's sword aside as you attack them, or is it you strike your opponent's sword aside and then attack into the opening?
Well, I believe in this section he's just talking about how to change between guards. So the beat itself shouldn't be the attack. You beat with the false edge, and then you come around with a cut that enters into the new guard. Whether that's an attacking cut or just a cutting motion to enter into the guard, I'm not sure.
Okay, so it's more like this. Well, I mean, here he's specifically talking in terms of just transitioning. But I guess the question is more: is his expectation that there would primarily be one action with one sword action with one foot action, like one change of footwork? You know, you do one thing with the sword, or do you do multiple things with the sword as you're passing or stepping?
I always assumed you would you clear the line with the beat and then come in with the step and the cut to change guard. But that's just my interpretation.
Okay.
Well, if I can comment on that. So like there was a form tournament for Bolognese a couple of months ago. That was an international thing that a bunch of people, submitted their forms for. And as part of one of those plays, there was a maneuver similar to what he describes here. You beat the sword of the enemy with the false edge of your own sword and throw a manfredo scollambrato, which is a cut from the top right down to the bottom left, while taking a great step, putting the right leg in front of the left. And it was a question of interpretation. Some people thought, okay, well, if I'm cutting if I'm beating with the false edge, then I need to do that with a step. Some people did it without a step. They just stood where they were, did a false edge beat, and then did the cut. My interpretation was, I don't know, what made sense to me, which is that yes, you can't take an entire step forward, because then that would be putting you. It would mean that you'd have to be starting in a different, foot first position. So basically pulling the back leg up to come to a position where your feet are together, and then with putting the right leg in front of the left with the cut. So you're drawing your feet together, coming a little bit closer to your opponent as you beat with the false edge, and then doing the lunge separately. So I think that, so I think maybe it would be interesting to see whether there is anything explicit about it, but I think it is open to interpretation.
Okay, cool. So does anyone have any comments, or any sort of further comments on that, or what I was going to suggest from here? Because I tend to need to actually physically do a motion to really wrap my head around it. So I was going to have a crack at reminding what's being described. I was also going to see if I can con Mosh into doing the same thing.
The main points that I took from this chapter is that inside guard sits your hilt in front of your inside shoulder, outside guard sits just outside your outside shoulder, and the true edge is always facing away from your body.
Yeah.
And that's why the sword will come in on the side of the false edge. So you do the false edge beat while you cut, and then come in with the true edge cut.
Yeah. So what's that? I'm just going to try mine.
And that seems to make a lot more sense when you've got that guard where the flat of your blade is pointed towards the earth, because then the beat is just a very simple action.
Yeah. So it's almost
also where he says, sorry.
But it's also a thing where you can prepare the beat, or you can do the beat with just body movement. I mean, the way I do beats, particularly in bayonet, is just by twisting the hips and using what are quite powerful muscles to displace the sword, which is interesting. This is possibly controversial since we're talking about an Italian manual, but George Silva, when he describes how you're meant to move, he says first you start with the hand, then the body, then the legs. And so you've sort of got that same motion where your movement is starting, in this case, your body, because your hand's already out there. And then that's then pulling your legs through, starting the step. So just to kind of get a visual cue of what I'm talking about, I'm just gonna jump back. So if you're starting in your inside guard, or your outside guard, sorry, and you want to beat, you turn, and then that turn of the hips, like back a bit, just make sure you can see, that turn of the hips is then what pulls the leg forward and gets that right transition. So if you're here, you beat, that's what allows you to then come forward, or that's sort of a preference to coming forward into the guard, which would then suggest that at least that movement is a little bit staggered, which is something fairly common. A lot of sword systems I find is that you don't want to try and do all the movements at once, especially because when moving at maximum speed, different parts of the body move quicker or slower. But rather than moving is a little bit staggered, is that, you know, you get your hand to you have your hand in the position, then you have your body, then you move your body to move the position that then moves your feet. So it's kind of a sequential thing.
Hopefully by that draw, then your half step forward would put the strong part of your sword onto the weaker part of theirs, so that the beat would still be effective. So then you could do, which I'm just watching Mosh do it now. Exactly what I'm thinking. No, just do what you're doing, mate. That's exactly what I was thinking to do. So you step in and do the beat and then straight into the cut. Because it wouldn't be much as a clash as a suppose you're sliding really past the short edge of their sword with your false edge. That's how I read it.
Yeah.
Can I just say like oh yeah, sorry.
Go. I was just asking if anyone had any comments, so I'm not going to stop you from commenting to ask if you can comment.
Okay. I just wanted to say two things about that false edge beat. So I shared this chapter with someone I know who does Marozzo, and what he tells me is the whole idea of starting with a false edge rising cut and then following up with a squalembrato. It's the universal answer in the Bolognese tradition. So if you're ever unsure of what you're doing, that's what you do. If there's a point in front of you, false edge rising cut, and then squalembrato. So that's a similarity with the Bolognese tradition. The other thing I wanted to comment is that Lovino specifically talked about this, how to do the false edge beat in the later chapters. I think what he mentions is your point needs to be slightly lower than your opponent's point, so that when you actually do the false edge beat, you end up getting that line closure and you end up speeding it a bit further. And then that's when you do the squalembrato.
Sort of, I like the idea of this as kind of like a universal kind of, if you don't know what to do this kind of thing. According to Mosh, apparently Gindi has done this particular thing to him a number of times. Gindi being a fencing instructor from Melbourne who specializes in mostly like Italian language systems, all over from like quite a long period of time. Yeah, okay, so do we have any further comments? And does anyone, or alternatively, does anyone else want to have a crack at like just actually going through the motion? And Mosh and I both have, but I was wondering if anyone else wants to.
Well, I'll follow with Mosh saying, which is what Mosh was doing. I've got a single-edged sword here. So if you step back, if you do a step back and do the draw, from the outside guard, so to step forward and put it across, you're still in the outside guard position. It just moves the point and then straight into the cut.
Yeah.
We all seem to be taking the same take on it.
Yeah. I think there's sort of a general consensus there. So are we happy to move on? In which case we can pause recording.